I built the company from nothing with my partner. We shook hands on the rooftop when it was just an idea and a borrowed laptop. 5 years later, I was no longer a founder in his eyes. I was a problem. The day he tried to remove me from my own board meeting, he smiled like he had already won. What he didn't know was simple. I had already seen the signature on the betrayal, and I had already planned the ending. The conference room on the 32nd floor always looked impressive from the outside. Glass walls, city skyline, polished table that reflected ambition. Today, it felt like a courtroom. I walked in at exactly 9 o'clock a.m. No one greeted me. That was the first sign. My business partner, Daniel Mercer, was already seated at the head of the table. Calm, controlled, the kind of man who practiced betrayal until it looked professional. "Glad you could join us," he said smoothly. Something in his tone told me this wasn't a regular board meeting. Around the table sat 5 board members. 3 of them wouldn't meet my eyes. That was the second sign. A folder waited in front of my chair. My name printed on it, termination proposal. I didn't open it yet. Daniel leaned forward. "We've been reviewing company performance and leadership structure. Leadership structure, not partnership. Not co-founder, just structure. I think you'll find," he continued, "that a transition is necessary for investor confidence." Investor confidence, the favorite excuse of people who steal politely. I finally opened the folder. Pages of carefully arranged words, concerns about strategic direction, leadership conflict, future scalability, and then the final page, a vote, my removal from the board. I looked up slowly. "Is this a joke?" I asked. No one answered immediately. Daniel smiled. "It's business." That's when I understood. This wasn't a discussion, it was a performance, and I was the character they had already decided to erase. I leaned back in my chair, studying each of them. Every signature in that folder had a history. Emails, messages, late-night approvals, private deals. They thought they were voting me out. What they didn't realize was simpler. I wasn't just a board member. I was the one who knew exactly how every single one of them got here. And Daniel, he had made one critical mistake. He assumed I came to the meeting to defend myself. I came to make sure they finished writing their names in ink before I revealed what they had already signed in shadow. Daniel tapped the table lightly, like he was signaling a show to begin. "Let's proceed," he said. The board secretary cleared his throat. "All in favor of removing the co-founder from the board." My name wasn't said out loud, but it echoed in the silence anyway. My fingers rested calmly on the table. No interruption, no protest. That confused them more than anger would have. One by one, hands started to rise, not all at once, carefully, politically, like each vote had been rehearsed. I counted them in my head. 3, 4, 5. Daniel didn't raise his hand. He didn't need to, he was the architect, not the participant. The secretary hesitated, looked at me briefly, then finished. Motion passes. A quiet breath of relief moved through the room. They expected me to explode, argue, threaten lawyers. Instead, I nodded slightly. "Interesting," I said. Daniel frowned. "That's it." I stood up slowly, adjusted my jacket, walked toward the glass wall instead of the exit. "Do you know what I find fascinating about board meetings?" I asked. No one answered. I turned back. "People think power is decided when the vote is called." My eyes moved across the table. "It's not." Daniel leaned forward slightly. "What are you talking about?" I smiled for the first time. "I'm talking about timing." The secretary's phone buzzed on the table, then another board member's, then another. Confusion spread. Daniel's assistant entered quickly, whispering something in his ear. I watched his expression change in real time. That was my favorite part. The moment confidence starts to crack, but pride refuses to let it fall. "What did you do?" Daniel asked sharply. I stepped closer to the table now. "Nothing illegal," I said calmly. "Just alignment." One board member opened his email. His face went pale. Another followed, then another. The documents they had voted on, the same ones that removed me, were suddenly attached to something new. A full audit trail, private transfers, undisclosed agreements, investor communications that never reached the board. And every single signature already linked. Daniel stood up now. "You're bluffing." I tilted my head. "No," I said, "I'm documenting." The room changed temperature after that, because they all realized the same thing at once. They hadn't removed me from power. They had just confirmed I was still close enough to use it. Daniel's chair scraped back as he stood fully now, trying to regain control of the room. "This is intimidation," he said sharply. "You're trying to manipulate the board after a legal vote." I didn't move. That was the mistake he kept making, thinking urgency meant control. "No," I replied calmly. "I'm just showing you what already exists." The board members were no longer looking at him. They were looking at their phones, laptops, open emails, each new message pulling them further out of the narrative Daniel had built. One of them finally spoke. These are internal investor threads." Another voice followed. "This transfer history isn't public. A third, quieter this time, how do you have access to this? I finally walked back to the table and placed both hands on it. Because I built half the system you're sitting on, I said. That sentence landed heavier than anything before it. Daniel's jaw tightened. You were a developer, not an executive. Don't rewrite history. I almost laughed. Executive titles don't build infrastructure, I said. Code does, systems do, and systems remember everything. The room fell into a different kind of silence now, not ignorance, understanding. Daniel's assistant leaned in again, whispering something urgent. This time, Daniel didn't respond immediately. For the first time I saw it, hesitation. I turned toward the board. You voted me out based on concerns about leadership alignment, I said, but you didn't check who authored the internal reports you used. I let that hang. Then I added, you should have. One board member opened another file. Then froze. It's signed off by Mercer Holdings, he said slowly. Daniel didn't move. Another board member looked up. That's your shell advisory firm, Daniel. Now the room shifted, not toward me, away from him. Daniel's voice dropped. Those are standard advisory consultations. I nodded. They are, I said. When they're disclosed, I tapped my tablet once. A new screen appeared on the conference display behind me. A network map, companies, subsidiaries, advisory firms. Shared accounts, and in the center, highlighted in red, Daniel's signature pattern across multiple undisclosed approvals. The board members stared at it like it was a crime scene. Daniel finally spoke again, but slower now. You went through my private data. I shook my head. No, I said. You connected it to mine. That was the difference. And that was when I saw it hit him, the realization that this wasn't about removing me. It was about what would be exposed the moment they tried. The display behind me stayed lit like a wound that refused to close. Red lines, connected entities, financial pathways that weren't supposed to be visible in a boardroom meeting like this ever. Daniel stepped toward the screen instinctively, like proximity could undo evidence. Turn that off, he said through his teeth. I didn't, because now it wasn't just my word against his. It was architecture against illusion. One of the board members pushed his chair back slightly. Daniel, why does this look like internal routing between company funds and Mercer Holdings? Another leaned closer, scrolling fast. These approvals, they're not just advisory. They're controlling disbursement triggers. The room was no longer listening to Daniel. It was interrogating him. That's when he snapped. This is a setup, he said loudly. He's trying to poison the board meeting with fabricated, I interrupted quietly. I picked up a single printed page from the folder still on the table. Smooth paper, expensive ink, their vote. I didn't fabricate your signatures, I said. I just matched them to the system logs you forgot existed. Silence again. But different now, heavier. The kind of silence where people are mentally rerunning every decision they've ever made. Daniel turned to the board members. You're seriously trusting him over me. I built the investor pipeline. I brought this company to valuation. One of them finally looked up at him. We're not choosing sides yet. That yet changed everything, because now it wasn't loyalty anymore. It was survival. I walked slowly around the table, my voice steady. You didn't remove me, I said. You tried to erase visibility on someone who still has system-level access. I paused behind Daniel's chair. And that, I added, is very different. He turned his head slightly, low enough only I could hear. What do you want? He whispered. There it was, the first crack in his certainty. I leaned in just enough for him to feel the answer before I said it out loud. I want you to understand something, I said quietly. Then I straightened and addressed the entire room. This company doesn't belong to whoever wins a vote. I tapped the table once. It belongs to whoever can still see what everyone else tries to hide. The board members exchanged looks now, no longer as allies, but as individuals calculating distance from impact. And Daniel finally stopped speaking, because for the first time since I entered that room, he realized the vote was never the event. It was the trigger. The silence after my last words didn't break, it settled. Not like peace, like pressure. Daniel was still standing, but the confidence he walked in with was gone, replaced by something far less comfortable: calculation. One of the board members finally spoke. We need legal counsel in this room. Now, another immediately added, and compliance needs to review everything shown here. Good, that was exactly where I wanted them. Daniel turned sharply toward me. You planned this. I met his eyes. No, I said. I prepared for it. There's a difference most people never understand until it's too late. The board secretary's phone rang again. He looked at the screen, then at me, visibly unsure whether to answer in front of everyone. I nodded once. Put it on speaker. He hesitated, then complied. A calm legal voice filled the room. Before any enforcement of a removal vote is executed, we need confirmation regarding Section 9.3 of the founding agreement. No one spoke. I watched Daniel carefully, because I already knew what would happen next. The lawyer continued. Any co-founder with original system architecture rights retains veto authority over structural governance changes if undisclosed dependency systems are identified. A few board members blinked. One whispered, "What does that mean?" I answered before anyone else could. "It means," I said evenly, "you can't remove me while I still control foundational infrastructure." Daniel's face tightened. "That clause was never enforced." "No," I agreed, "because no one ever triggered it properly." I tapped my tablet once more. The screen changed again. This time, it wasn't financial data. It was system dependency mapping, core architecture nodes tied directly to my original authentication keys, still active across internal operations. Daniel stepped back slightly. For the first time, he looked less like a founder and more like someone realizing the building still needed the person he tried to push out. One board member closed his laptop slowly. "So what happens now?" I looked around the table. At every signature, every vote, every carefully aligned betrayal, and I answered simply, "Now," I said, "you decide whether this was a misunderstanding or an attempted removal of someone you legally can't remove." I let that sink in. Then I added quieter, "and I decide whether this company continues with its current leadership or gets rebuilt from the foundation up." Daniel finally sat back down, not defeated, but contained. Because now he understood what the board had just learned. The vote didn't remove me. It revealed who had been building the system and who had been living inside it.